It's hard to believe. I mean, you don't quite appreciate this, but you're all 1Ls, right? You finish your first year, and you go into 2L and 3L. But for us, it's weird. You know, it's this weird cycle. Every 6 months, we get this brand new crop of faces who we're obsessed with for 6 months, and they disappear. Never see them ever again. No, I mean, it's a weird aspect of being a professor because, you know, from the period from, let's say, January through, May, we see you nonstop. And then after that, I may never see you again until graduation. It's this weird fixation. You'll stay with your classmates in similar fashions, but for us, it's a weird thing. If any of you ever taught, you know, in school, you get what I'm saying. But it's a weird feeling. But anyway, yeah. So last class, almost there. Any questions? Anything on your minds? Yes, sir. Yeah, thank you so much for reminding me. I made a mistake on the memo, and a few of you wisely pointed it out. This was about question 2, right? In question 2, Potter had a reversion, and I inadvertently wrote down that Ron had the reversion. So this is correct. If you want to write it down, just take your memo and cross out the correct answer. Potter had the reversion. Ron died. And I apologize. I inverted them in my head, and I wrote the wrong thing. In fact, later in the answer, I wrote it correct. In the beginning, I wrote it wrong, so I apologize for that. We are all fallible. All men are mortal, as they say. Okay, but I appreciate the reminder. A couple of you noted that. And I think I met with every single one of you, or just about. I think I got every one of you in my office, which is very good. Most times, people never come to my office, so this is refreshing. All right, anything on your minds? Any questions? All right. So again, the cutoff for your exams is on, was it April, that Monday, was it the 30th at 5. I'll probably be here that day, so you can come by with questions. Do you have an exam that day or no?
Yes.
What time's your exam?
6.
Is it even worth my time being here that day?
No. We have to be in our rooms by 5:15.
So no one's going to come talk to me that day, will they?
No.
Okay, that's fine. All right, I'll do by email. That's fine. All right. I guess no office hours today. Okay. All right. Delete from calendar. I was going to come in, but appreciate the honesty. I was here late enough last night. All right. Questions? Nothing? All right. So here's what I want to do for today. I want to go over my final exam from last year. The first can't do the entire thing in 90 minutes. Too much time. But I'll go over the first question. And the way I want to do this is by walking through the question in the same fashion that I would like you to do it on the exam. I met with a lot of you, and for at least maybe half of you, your biggest problem wasn't actually content, and that you had a more or less decent understanding of the material. For at least half of you, your biggest problem was time, that you weren't able to finish on time. And that's something you can work on. I can't drill into you in 90 minutes the entire semester. I wouldn't even try and do that. But I can try to work with you on pacing yourselves. So the first thing, this is the exam, by the way. This is spring 2017, so basically 1 year ago. The first thing you have to recognize is you have 3 hours total. I'm sorry? Stretching, thank you. 3 hours total. Okay? You have 2 questions worth equal weight. That means that you should probably plan to spend roughly 90 minutes in the first one and 90 minutes in the second one. If you happen to finish the first one quicker, that's great. But if you spend 2 hours on question number 1, do the math, that means you'll have an hour left to question number 2. You are selling yourself very short. And I can actually chart this with numbers, right? The scores on second question are always lower than the first question. Why? Because people spend all their time on question number 1 and don't spend as much time on question number 2. So this happens every year. I'll tell you this, you'll ignore me. But if at the 90-minute mark, and please bring your watch, don't rely on the classroom clock, it's still distracting. If the 90-minute mark, you're not done with question number 1, just stop and go to the next one. Don't say, oh, 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes, because that's 5 minutes you don't have for the second question. So force yourself to stop and go on to the second one. Okay? dangling off the edge. The second thing is the word limits, right? There are 2 questions. Each question with a 1,000-word limit. That means you have to write a total of 2,000 words. But it's not 1,500 and 500. It's 1,000 and 1,000. I showed you all how to do the word count. There's a little document icon. You click it. It pops up to the word count. Do not do the character count. A couple of you did that for the midterm. I warned you. It didn't matter. Don't do the character count. Do a word count. And it's 1,000 per. You'll see a separation. There's box number 1 and box number 2. Put them in different boxes. So that way the word count will be separate. Okay? If you don't know how to do this, go to the registrar and ask them in advance. Don't try and figure out the day of because you'll be panicked and then you'll be in trouble. You can handwrite it, but please do a manual word count. I strongly discourage you from handwriting. I understand stuff happens. Your computer crashes. It happens. When I was taking the bar, one of my friends forgot her charger at home. It's an 8-hour exam. So she handwrote it, emergency. It happens. Don't forget your charger, Dave. She was like, hey, Josh, can I borrow your charger? I'm like, no. I'm not running back and forth and handing over. No. I think I already told her, go on Craigslist, offer someone $500 for a charger, just whatever it is to get me with charger the morning of. Because it was in Roanoke, Virginia. There were no Apple stores there. It was middle of nowhere. But anyway, she eventually passed. Okay. I did. Anyway. So there's that. The exam's completely open book. Someone actually asked me, I had this instruction, everything has to be printed. I didn't mean printed by a computer. If you have handwritten notes, that's fine. Someone actually asked me, I was surprised, are handwritten notes acceptable? Of course, yeah. By printed, I mean not on your iPad. Because a couple years ago, a student said, can I bring my iPad to the exam? And I put that as a poll, and everyone said absolutely not. So I said, okay, no iPad. I mean, I don't have any paper in my office. You see me, everything I have is electronic, but you're stuck with paper, at least for this one day. Don't cheat. Please don't do it. It's not worth it. You will get an F, and then you'll be reported to the bar. Just don't do it. Don't go to the bathroom. Don't talk. Really, it's not worth it. We've had this happen in the past. People start giggling in the bathroom and talking about things, and they get in trouble. So don't do it. All right. Yeah, and don't turn the page. That's fairly explanatory. Wait till the proctor begins. Okay, I'm actually not allowed to be here the day of the exam. My very first semester, I came to wish my students good luck, and they said, you got to get out of here. I'm like, well, why? So the fear is if I'm in the room, someone will try to ask me a question, which might give an advantage. So I can't even be in the room. So I will not be here. I'm not here. Don't worry, but I'm not going to be here. But yeah, I actually want to say, good luck, guys. They said, get out of here. You have to leave. All right, I leave the room, whatever. Less work for me. All right. So again, the exam, 2 questions, part 1, part 2, 50% each. Don't slack on one. Don't slack on the other. Give it equal amount of effort. In this case in particular, I said answers part 1 first and part 2 second. I do that occasionally because sometimes there's crossover. That is, question 2 followed up on question 1. So if I give you that instruction, follow it. Okay? All right. So the first thing you should do, the very first thing that you should do is read the instructions. I know this sounds really stupid, but a lot of you don't read instructions. Especially in my common law class, none of them read the damn instructions. They got the question wrong. You need to read the instructions. And it's not just so you know what to do, but I give you hints. I give you little hints about what you're expected to answer. Like, for example, if I mention in the instructions you're in a community property state, it's like, hello, he's asking about family law, right? Little hints like that can actually make you less stressed, because I'll give you little insights. All right, so let me read this to you. It says, our story begins in the year 2029. By the way, I like time travel. If you've reviewed my old exams, I almost always involve time travel, because it messes with you. It allows you to really test future interest when you're going back and forth in time. I don't know why I like this, but it really, they test well. So the year's 2029. You're negotiating a treaty between the humans and the race of robots, and the war. You're asked for a memo of 1,000 words addressing 5 issues. I don't need a memo format to, from, all that stuff. I don't care. Don't worry about it. But the memo is simply my way of saying address these issues. In this post-apocalyptic world, there are no courts, and all laws of civil society have eroded. You can rely on the common law or natural law principles. I often have a question along these lines because I'm trying to test you on common law stuff, right? Hunting, acquisition by discovery, conquest, right? These doctrines don't work in our courts. So I'll often give this sort of dystopian future or like a primeval past where we don't have our civil structure. But you can still apply all the cases and the principles we've discussed. By the way, if I say natural law principles, you know what I'm asking you about. That's Locke, right? Grotius, Pufendorf, those guys. So again, if you read the instructions, you get a little hint of what I'm trying to ask you about. Okay. So the first thing to do is read the instructions. It's going to take about a minute. Then what I suggest is you scroll down to the 5 prompts. Now, I started doing something differently last year. I'm probably going to stick to it. Where instead of putting the 5 questions at the end, I put them interspersed. I actually like that a little bit better because it's a little more focused. But wherever I put the question, the middle or the end, read the questions first. Okay, read the questions first. So it says here, after time travels, John and Skynet attempt to negotiate a peace treaty. Okay? They've asked you to prepare a memo of no more than 1,000 words, addressing 5 properties. By the way, don't go over the word limit. If you do, I won't read. I'll stop reading. Someone will, invariably, but don't go over the word limit. So question 1 says, both Skynet and the machines and John and mankind assert ownership of LA. Discuss the strongest arguments in favor of each party's claim. That doesn't tell you too much, but you know there's some sort of dispute over the ownership of Los Angeles. Okay. Question 2. Both Skynet and John assert ownership over Arnold. Right, a person? How do you own a person? So you know there's some sort of weird ownership issue of a body. We discussed that, right, with the organ cases. Discuss the strongest arguments in favor of both parties' claims. Number 3. Discuss whether Arnold's construction of the time machine violates any of Skynet's common law or natural property rights. Where did we talk about invention and building? Well, that was the INS case, right? The development of doctrine. And it says, don't focus on statutory claims because no statute in effect. Don't give me the Copyright Act. Someone will try. Not relevant. Not applicable. Question number 4. Based on the text, or only, and I emphasize only, based only on the text of Sarah's conveyance written on the Polaroid, identify all relevant present and future interests of Blackacre on August 13th, 1995. August 13th is my birthday. That's the way I put it. You'll be asked to assess the title. Okay, that's part 2. Don't worry about it, right? Why are you laughing?
It's her birthday too.
Your birthday's August 13th?
14th.
Close enough.
Yeah.
Twinsies, right? So, if you notice, there's only one future interest question in this one. And someone said, oh my God, Blackman, they mentioned me 3 future interest questions, right? I can do whatever I want, right? I reserve the right to test you as I wish. So don't make any representations on past exams. Okay, number 5, it says, in this post-apocalyptic world, there are no courts or law. Address why it is that it's important to protect property rights. Consider the impact of the protection of property rights on this conflict. So this is your sort of policy question. I picked these from all over the place. You can have a lot of different things. Reading these questions probably take you another maybe 4 or 5 minutes. So now you're at, 5 or 6 minutes in? Try and keep a rough clock. Okay, now you start reading. And here's what I suggest, right? You know what your 5 questions are. Generally, I put the facts in the sequence of the questions, right? So the first paragraph or 2 refer to question number 1, right? And the next paragraph probably refers to question number 2. And then the next paragraph is probably question number 3. And the next paragraph is probably question number 4. Policy one's all over the place. But generally, the paragraphs are sorted in the order the questions asked. I don't always do that, but generally that's my practice. You can check me on it if you want. So as you're reading, say, the first or second paragraph, you should be thinking about question number 1. Right? Remember, again, question number 1 was ownership of Los Angeles, Skynet machines, John and mankind, right? So let's start reading. Okay. I always put these little 2 dashes. I don't know why I do that. That's how I single the question starting. I don't know where I got that from. After rapid advances in artificial intelligence, by the way, if you haven't seen Terminator, it doesn't really matter, but this is the plot of the Terminator movies. After rapid advances in artificial intelligence, a network of self-aware robots known as Skynet And I actually bold the names of the characters to make it a little bit easier for you. A network of robots known as Skynet rebelled against its creator. The United States, perhaps foolishly, had put Skynet in control of the nuclear arsenal. On August 29th, 1997, so-called Judgment Day, Skynet launched all the missiles, resulting in a near extinction of mankind. A small band of survivors, led by John, mounts the resistance against the Skynet. Okay, so here we go. Today, in the year 2029, the war between man and machine centers on the ownership of Los Angeles. Skynet claims that it acquired LA through its nuclear strike. John counters that though much of the population of LA was exterminated, his group survived, and the resistance continues. Further, John cites the fact that Skynet was created by man and relied on man-made nuclear weapons. Skynet counters that AI evolved beyond anything man had designed, that the nuclear arsenal was controlled by robots. All right, so I'm going to jump now to the A+ answer. And to preempt some of your complaints, this is not a perfect paper. I didn't do the memo last year. I started doing that this year. I think I'm going to keep doing that because people complain when the A+ answer is wrong, perhaps recently. So let's see what this person wrote. Okay. So question 1. Again, go back to what is question 1, right? Question 1 is, discuss the strongest arguments in favor of each party's claim. How would I like you to answer this question? The strongest arguments in favor of Skynet is X. New paragraph. The strongest arguments in favor of John is Y. Give it to me easy, right? I read 100-something of these papers. Make it as easy as possible for me to read this without me having to guess at what you're trying to tell me. Understand? Okay. So let's see what this person wrote. I don't remember if it was he or she. I actually don't remember who it was. So again, he didn't do exactly what I want. He said, okay, so to claim Los Angeles, Skynet will rely on the principle of acquisition by conquest. Acquisition by conquest. And we discussed this, right? When 2 or more people lay claim to the same land, the winner of the duel, rightfully acquires the land. Skynet will argue that based on their nuclear strike, they have substantially exterminated the human race and have rendered control over LA. Therefore, they have effectively acquired LA through victory in battle. Furthermore, although a weaker argument, Skynet may rely on the precedent of Macintosh and claim that they have a superior intelligence in comparison to human race. The humans merely occupy the land because the humans are aboriginals, not sophisticated enough to own the land. And therefore, Skynet's justified in taking the land from them. I think those are good arguments, right? So we have a couple of doctrines. You have acquisition by conquest. This is where you fight to the death. Whoever wins, get it. We didn't really discuss what happens if it's a partial genocide, right? If it's only it's not a complete victory, but only a partial victory. Is that enough? We haven't discussed this in class, but I think it's fair game for you to write about. Also, I think the Johnson argument was actually pretty creative, precisely because you do have this race of super advanced species, and they're basically oppressing these animals, like they're putting them down the same way we did in the Johnson case. Any questions on the Skynet argument? Anything in your minds? Things that maybe you would have put differently. Okay. All right, so let's go on to the next paragraph. Okay. Again, they didn't do this, but I like people separate paragraphs. If there are 2 parts to the question, make it real easy. Say now the strongest argument. I'm sorry, Meg. Yeah.
I actually do have a question
Please.
about the Skynet part. They do bring up the precedent of Macintosh, but they don't kind of explain what that is. Do we assume you know what that is, or should we throw in a sentence that explains
A
it?
sentence about how it applies would be nice, right? So Johnson concerned the whether native Indians are allowed to buy and sell property, and here likewise these are inferior humans, and they lack the power to acquire the property. I mean, you can do it in one sentence; it doesn't take that much time. But yes. Again, if you put a second paragraph, I like that. That'd be nice. Always number, please. That makes it easy for me to jump 1, 2, 3. And then the person who wrote. Person wrote, in contrast, John and the resistance will contend that by the way, your paper has lots of typos. Don't worry about it. Don't kill yourself with typos. I understand it's stressful times. John and the resistance will contend that because they are still alive and fighting, acquisition by conquest has not been fulfilled. In other words, they didn't conquer. They're still fighting. John will contend that the LA still belongs to the human race because they're still alive, and they're first civilized people to see it and lay claim to it. Well, this is the discovery doctrine. That is, mankind still has the discovery right from the conception, right? He could probably cite Johnson for that as well because it was discussed. Additionally, John will argue that humans are an intelligent race and are sophisticated, and they are sophisticated because they have not only created the property rights, but built the robots themselves. This rebuts the argument that they're savages. So really, this is basically two sides of Johnson on each side. Okay, any questions on the second part of the question 1? Anything on number 1? Oh, I'm sorry. I have my line vision. Please, go ahead.
Would there not be something about, I mean, yes, it says that they used the robot creation to make it sophisticated, but wouldn't they also put property rights over anything that the robots did because the robot already created?
I think that comes to the point in the second question as well, but I think that's a good point, right? This is basically like your principal and agent, right? When your agent does something, isn't it go back to your respondeat superior type argument? I think that's a fair game, yeah. It's a fair argument to make. The king sent Columbus to go conquer the new world, or the queen. Can they rely on the work of their agents? Good point. Yes, sir. Exactly what I said. Yeah. I think this is pretty good. I think it got just about everything. Nothing's coming to mind, but I think it's a combination of Johnson versus McIntosh on different sides, and then applying it. Anything else, number 1? And again, if you take 5 minutes to read the prompts, another 15 minutes to read the questions, you should be giving yourself about 10 minutes for each subpart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? That takes about an hour. And if you take 10 minutes per question, you'll have roughly 5 or 10 minutes left over, and that gives you some time to check yourself. But make sure you don't leave stuff blank. I had this epiphany with one student last night who was having difficulty writing enough. And I told the student it's better to write a not good answer than to leave it blank, right? Because you write something that's not good, I can give you some partial credit. But if you leave it blank, I give you a big 0. So don't leave stuff blank. All right, let's do number 2. Okay, so it says, both Skynet and John assert ownership over Arnold. Okay, discuss the strongest argument in favor of each party's claims. Okay, so let's read paragraph 2. Okay, so this paragraph. To advance its cause, Skynet develops a new super soldier that's a hybrid between man and machine. To build this artificial intelligence chimera, codenamed Arnold, Skynet needed to extract a special strain of human cells that could self-regenerate, even when removed from the body. These cells would allow the soldier to heal itself when injured. Only one person on Earth has such special cells, John. After John was wounded in the battlefield by Skynet, he spilled a few drops of blood on the ground. Skynet dispatched a tiny drone fashioned to the shape of a mosquito to extract a small sample of blood. Skynet then infused the genetic material into the digital brain. On the outside, Arnold appears to be flesh and blood human being, but inside, he is a robot. By the way, the word robot comes from the Russian for robotat, which means to work. That's the origin of the word. He will be the perfect soldier for Skynet, or at least that was the plan. Okay, so why are you laughing? Oh, come on, have some liberty with this one, right? I take a lot of pride in writing this, but it takes me a full day to write a question, like a full 8 or 9 hours. These are really hard to write, because I have to anticipate all the crazy things they'll come up with and negate them. Right? And I apologize, if you see my older exams are not as good, because I didn't quite know enough. But writing a good exam question is really tough. I have to try to anticipate all the various turns you'll take and cut them off so you don't deviate from my question. I want you to answer the question I have here and not run on a tangent. I don't always succeed, but I try. So this question involves cells and blood, right? So which case should we be thinking of? The Moore versus the Board of Regents case. And in particular, we discussed in class last year and this year the Henrietta Lacks case, right? The immortal life of Henrietta Lacks. Remember we talked about her case? How she had this special type of cells that could regenerate. And we discussed a few minutes about how this works. So, who owns these cells? They're no longer a body. They were extracted without their consent. Indeed, the guy's bleeding because the guy was attacked by the drones, right? Attacked by the strikes. Okay. There's also the issue of the creation of this robot, right? Who has the rights to the robots? Because basically, this is a point raised earlier. It's the robots creating another robot. And if man created the first robot, it's definitely sort of subsidiary claim. So let's see what the person wrote here. So to assert rights over Arnold, Skynet will argue that they were entitled to ownership over Arnold based on the principles of acquisition by creation. We did this case with the INS versus AP case, right? When you create something, you assume a property right for it. And this was the case of INS versus AP. This was the hot news doctrine case, which we studied. In particular, Skynet will claim that the robots would not invest time and labor in creating anything. It could be stolen from them without consequence. This would erode property rights and create a situation comparable to the tragedy of the commons. That's a good policy argument, which they're working into questions 2. Okay? Additionally, Skynet will argue that based on Locke's labor theory, Skynet should retain ownership because they have mixed and injected their labor in creating Arnold. Okay, so again, you're working in Locke to this question, which is good. Skynet should retain ownership because they have mixed and injected their labor in creating Arnold. I read that already. Okay. On the other hand, okay, again, make a new paragraph. The strongest argument in favor of John is X. Just separate it because this is one long, huge block, and it doesn't lend itself well to reading. John may argue that the only reason they were able to build Skynet in the first place, Arnold in the first place, was by taking his blood without permission. Okay. Accordingly, like Moore versus Regents, John did not give informed consent to taking a blood, and therefore Skynet can't use it. Okay, it's a good argument, right? John may further argue that since Skynet uses blood, Arnold is essentially a part of him. And because Arnold has John's blood, he owns Arnold just as he owns his own organs and tissue. This is the Henrietta Lacks case, right? Okay, good. The next case is no longer in your book, unfortunately. They removed it from your book in the last edition. I liked it. But this was a case about a commercial where they made, it was for Samsung, where they had a robot dressed up like Vanna White with a blonde wig and a dress next to a game board. And the point of the commercial was saying in the year 2020, people they'll use Samsung VCRs, but Vanna White will be replaced by a robot. The irony is that Vanna White's still here and no one uses VCRs anymore. But the question was, could Samsung use a robot looking like Vanna White, the Wheel of Fortune host, without permission? So don't worry about this last one, because we haven't started this case. But Judge Kaczynski is no longer on the bench. So times change. Okay. So at least with respect to the INS versus AP and the Moore versus Regents, and also, he didn't mention Henrietta Lacks. He should have. But that was also relevant. So any questions on number 2?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, please.
For Young's argument on number 2, could he also argue the dissensus? Could we put the dissensus argument as part of, even though it is weak, however...
Which dissent?
The dissent and more in the...
Oh, yeah.
Case,
By the way, Justice Arabian died recently. It was in the news recently. He wrote the dissent in Moore. He died like 2 weeks ago. Totally random. But yeah, go ahead.
Could we talk about
Yeah.
his view?
The holiness of the sacrament of the body, that part?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, you're not bound by majority opinions. I won't tell it to my common law students, but you are, in this case, not bound by majority opinions. You can discuss dissent. You can discuss the Pierce v. Post dissent. Just make sure you say it's a dissent. Every year, someone says, oh yeah, Pearson proposed majority labor theory. No. It's the dissent. I promise you, at least 5 people write Pearson labor theory. The majority was rule of capture. But yeah, good point to some. So yeah, dissent's absolutely brilliant. Okay, any questions on number 1? I'm sorry, number 2. Anything on number 2? Yes, sir.
Okay, this may have been the confusion when I read it. Did the mosquito get the blood from John or from the ground?
The ground. And that was an important point. There's also an abandonment issue.
Yeah.
And I think I had that in mind when I wrote the question, right? And I don't think the student picked up on that. But the fact that it was on the ground, was that blood abandoned? There's also the other related issue that the guy was only bleeding, right? Because he was wounded on the battlefield. So like they basically wounded him, forced him to bleed, let it drop on the ground, and then they took it. So I think it's actually it's a very intricate fact pattern, and the A+ didn't quite get all the wrinkles there. Yeah, good point. What's that?
I was going to say, I used more for Skynet when I answered it.
How so?
The fact that the cells were out of his body, so he no longer had a connection.
I think that's actually what I was getting at. I think that's probably what I had in mind, that they weren't his anymore because they were abandoned on the ground, right? Once the cells are removed, it's not his anymore. Like with Henrietta Lacks, they can say, well, the cells are outside of her body, it's not hers anymore. I think it's a good argument. Anything else on number 2? But you can see that you can go either way with these questions, right? I don't ever have, whenever it's like a which has a stronger argument, I think you can probably go either way in all these questions. I try and make them more or less down the middle. Any number 2? Yes.
Would there be any like cause for like talking about how it's like a renewable resource in the body instead of like cells, which you can't like aren't considered like something you could sell, whereas like blood, eggs, sperm.
Well, but do the cells here renew?
I mean, it's technically blood.
So doesn't blood renew? So it's not like a kidney yet. You don't grow another kidney.
Yeah.
So I think you would say that this is similar to the cells, and because they're regenerating, it's not a fixed resource that can be transmitted. What else is number 2? Going once, twice. All right, we'll move to number 3. All right. Next paragraph. So it says, because of his human-infused cybernetics, Arnold began to develop sympathies for the resistance, and in particular John, whom he considered something of a father figure. Irony alert, right? Soon, Arnold learned that Skynet had developed a time machine. The plan was to send a robot named Terminator back to the year 1984. He was born that year, right? To kill John's mother, Sarah. That way, she would never give birth to John, and there would be no resistance. Arnold decides to switch sides. With his employee badge, Arnold enters into the Skynet library. Using his superintelligence, he quickly scans through the time machine's 5,000-page instruction manual, memorizing every step in the construction process. Arnold runs away from Skynet and joins the resistance. So this is about stealing of intellectual property here. And this is like the INS VAP case. And a couple of facts I think are relevant. One, he uses his employee badge, which involves some sort of a fiduciary trust breach. Also, he has a super ability to memorize 5,000 pages in a short time. That's not your normal IP case, which generally we're not capable of such retention. Okay, so it says here, and the question was framed, discuss whether Arnold's construction of the time machine, again, it's not just the stealing of the information, read the question carefully. It says the construction of it, right, the building of it, whether the building of it violates any of Skynet's common law or natural property rights. Don't give me statutory claims, don't about the Copyright Act. So here we say Skynet will rely in the case of INS versus AP and assert a quasi-property right, time machine's instruction manual. That's the right case. And it discusses quasi-property rights like a common law right. Skynet will say that Arnold copied and misappropriated the instruction manual when he gave it to John and the resistance to use. Skynet will also say that they made an investment in creating the manual, and the thoughts and creations can't be simply copied down. This is getting at labor theory. It doesn't say it, I'll say it later, but it's the idea that when you're putting in more effort into something, it should be protected. Okay, here we go, next paragraph. Yeah. Skynet may also argue, from a naturalist standpoint, that Locke's labor theory, once more, fragment sentence, Skynet put the time and effort in creating the revolutionary time machine, and therefore belongs to them. The only counter that Arnold would have is that he did not use the manual for commercial use and didn't reap any profit from it. That's actually in the INS case, right? They said if you and I share a story, we're not doing it for commercial reasons, so there's not a problem. But when competitors do it, there is a problem. So actually that was they didn't make the point explicit as they could, but that's what they were getting at. Skynet would fail to make a viable claim, there's no damages. However, this argument will not go very far. Although the holding in INS may be limited in the commercial and use sense, the stealing of that IP would be in violation of natural property rights. And from a policy standpoint, it would not be fair to rule, I think that's what they meant, not be fair to rule in favor of Arnold because it may lead to an encouragement of trespass and misappropriation of other property. This is good. At the very end, putting a little bit of policy of why this should not be the rule. Okay? I would like to be a little bit tighter about explaining specifically INS is holding that when you have a non-commercial sharing information, when two people tell a story to each other, there's not a problem. It's only when it's a commercial in nature. That would be. I mean, they alluded to it, but they didn't make that tightly enough, and that was a very important aspect of the INS case. Okay. So question to number 3. Sure. If you remember in INS VAP, they discussed, can two friends tell each other, oh man, I read this story in the newspaper, and they tell the story in the newspaper. The court said that's not a problem because there's no commercial competition. But when you have the INS and the Associated Press and they're competing, they can't engage in the same act. Right? The student alluded to it, but didn't hit it very precisely. You're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
For the intellectual property argument, you want to be specific to those thoughts or just about copyright?
Okay. Whoa. I said no statutory claims.
No,
Though.
okay.
That's why I said I didn't want you to talk about that.
Okay.
Make sense? Okay. What else on number 3? I'm sorry?
The moral imperative,
What is the moral imperative?
that if something is useful for the greater good, then there can be limits on intellectual property ownership.
Did we talk about that this semester?
Yeah, the AIDS vaccine.
The AIDS vaccine?
Yeah, you were talking about, it's a con to the policy.
No, but did I mention that? Did I?
You might have done it in the lecture, so I'm not just looking at that.
Maybe. It's a good answer. So, I like it. I haven't thought of that. So, is your argument that if the greater good demands us, that's what's allowed? The ends justify the means, right? You can make that argument, yeah.
That wouldn't be counted again. That's not a misapplication of copyright.
Well, where did I say that? I mean, I think this might have come up in the Moore case, right? Where, I think I know where perhaps this came up. If the Moore v. Regents case came out the other way, and they demanded that every single person who has or sells use gets a share of the money, it might disincentivize research. So perhaps ruling in favor of Skynet here might discourage innovation because people are afraid that they're going to be held liable for stealing ideas. It stifles innovation. That might be, I think, what you're getting at. Moral imperative. I don't think I ever use those words, but it's good. Any questions, number 3? Okay. Let's go on to the 4th one. We'll have a good future interest one. All right, so the next paragraph. Okay, here it is. Oh, I forgot to read this part. Anyway, it said, without making a copy of the instruction manual, Arnold is able to build a time machine from scratch. He improves on the design. Skynet's time machine requires time travelers to go back naked. That's actually a thing in the movie. Arnold's allows you to go fully clothed. So he actually made improvements upon it as well. That's your fact to the answer. If you ever see Terminator 1 and then Terminator 2 and then Terminator 17, it allows Arnold coming back naked. That's what happens. What was that?
No, I'm sorry, I said 17. I didn't know there were that.
How many have there been? A lot. They stopped numbering them, I think.
Yeah, they're making 6 right now.
They should terminate the franchise. Okay, so John orders Arnold to go back in time to 1984, birthday, and protect his mother, Sarah, from the Terminator. Okay. And then it says, as Arnold is preparing his journey, he finds a safe connected to a timer. At the moment the timer goes off, the safe opens up. Inside the safe, there's a Polaroid picture. I trust you know what a Polaroid is. A couple of people won't. It's like an instant photo. This will make no sense in 20 years if it tells a Polaroid, right? There's a Polaroid picture of a woman and a young boy. He immediately recognized them. It is John and his mother, Sarah. Scribbled on the back of the photograph is a handwritten message. It says, from Sarah to my son John, so long as your father's alive, you live on Blackacre, comma. But if you abandon Blackacre, comma, then Blackacre will go to your father, comma. But if your father is dead, comma, the land will return to your mother and her heirs, period. I want you to actually say comma. I know it sounds stupid, but the commas actually make a very, very, very big deal in how you read these. If you ignore the commas, you're not going to get it right. So I'm going to walk through this. The A+ answer I don't think is right, so I'm going to just not look at it for now. No one gets 100. I've not got 100 yet. Not happened. So I'm going to give you my opinion on this one. It says, from Sarah. Okay. That means Sarah presumably had Blackacre and Fee Simple beforehand. To my son John, so long as your father's alive. Now, someone would say, aha, Blackman, so long as, right? That's a fee simple determinable. That's wrong. Look at what's actually going on. John has it so long as your father's alive. What is that? That's a life estate measured by not John's life, but by the life of his father. We call that the life estate or atrophy. Remember that? Right? Again, don't be thrown off by the so long as or the but if language. Right? Look at what it's actually doing. Probably a quarter of the students in this section wrote a fee simple determinable. And they're all wrong. They got points off. Okay, so it says, to my son John, so long as your father's alive. But it doesn't say to my son John and his heirs. Right? It's not that neat. But instead it says, to my son John, so long as your father's alive, comma, you will live on Blackacre. Now, what does that mean you will live on Blackacre? Does that mean you own it? Does that mean you have it in fee simple? Does that mean you have it, you can sell it? Is that a restraint and alienation? And we did this case, the White case. Remember Sandra White? Where she said, I leave all my furniture to my niece, Sandra, but then I leave it to her daughter to live on, right? That was the key word, to live on. And the court said, well, we're not going to mean that literally. We're not going to read that literally. We're going to mean basically she has it and she can sell it. So that clause, you live on Blackacre, I don't think it makes any difference, but I would like you to address what that means living on. So it says, to my son John, so long as your father's alive. That's the life estate per atrophy. Okay? We have another clause. It says, comma. But if you abandon Blackacre, there's the limit, right? It's not the living part, it's the abandonment part. If you leave it, if you sell it, I think you can define abandon in a couple different ways. But if you abandon Blackacre, comma, then Blackacre will go to your father. So this is a little bit different, right? You haven't seen something like this. So we had a life estate per atrophy. But it can terminate, no pun intended, it can end early. Two of you got that, good. The life estate per atrophy can terminate early. How? If abandonment, if John abandons the land. And who's it go to? It goes to the father. Okay? We call that a shifting executory interest, right? Because it's divesting, cutting short the interest of the transferee, the grantee. So to say it completely, it's a life estate pro attribuit that's subject to the father's shifting executory interest. Let me say it again for you. It's a life estate pro attribuit that's subject to the father's shifting executory interests. Everyone with me? We're not done yet, but we're almost there. We're almost there. Okay? Everyone with me so far? Any questions on that so far? Again, there's only one future interest question. There's a lot packed into it. There's a lot packed into this one, which is why I only gave one. Okay? Next clause. But what happens if the father's dead? Right, again, this is only a life estate pro attribuit. We know at some point the father dies. What happens to Blackacre after the father dies? Got to go somewhere, right? John cannot keep it after his father's dead. So it says in the next clause, but if your father is dead, the land will return to your mother and her heirs. What do we call that? Right? Well, this is a future interest after a life estate that goes back to the grantor. This is reversion. This is reversion for the mother, Sarah. So, to summarize, right? The present interest, John has a life estate pro attribuit subject to the father's shifting executory interest. The father has a future interest in shifting executory interest, and Sarah, the mother, has reversion in fee simple. So eventually it comes right back to the mom, or the mom's heirs, as it were. It gets complicated in the next question because John is an heir, but it goes back to the mom and his heirs. But I'll leave it at that for now. Yes, ma'am. I'll get you in a second. Do not say possibly reverter, okay? You're going to want to say, oh, it goes back to the mom if the father's dead. There's a possibly reverter. Don't fall into the trap. Please listen to me. I'm almost certain in your exam it's not going to be a possibly reverter. It might be, but this is not it, right? Say reversion. Don't say there's a possibility reverter. 10 of you will do this. I can promise. I can count it. But this is not a possibly reverter. It's straight up reversion. Yeah.
For the father's interest, I know you're just shifting executory interest. You have to say interest.
Well, actually, how long if the father? Let me ask this question: if John abandons the property, right, goes to the father, how long does the father keep it for? Till what?
Until he dies.
He dies, and then what happens to it?
And then the virgin back to Sarah.
It goes to Sarah sooner or later, right? It's going to go back to Sarah once the father dies, one way or the other. The only question is whether the father gets it at any point during his life. And only gets it is if John abandons land. Make sense? Austin, was your hand up?
Yeah, kind of answered.
Same question? Right. It's going back to Sarah at the end of the father's life. There's no doubt about that. The only variable is if there's abandonment, then the father gets it during his natural life. Everyone get that much? Right? So again, it's one question, but there's a lot packed into it. And it's weird. It's like, can you cut short a life estate? Yeah, why not? You can cut short anything. There's nothing stopping this. Yeah.
I think I'm gonna have that same issue with that. Father's dead.
If the father's dead.
I thought that was only in connection to the clause of if he abandons Blackacre. I thought I was thinking about this, that if it would go back to her, it would say, but when your father died.
Aha! But look, so everyone get Andrew's question, right? When it says from Sarah to my son, so long John is his father's alive, that's a life estate pro attribuit, subject to the executory interest. But following the life estate is reversion.
Yeah.
Right? It goes back to Sarah at the death of the father. No doubts, 100%, right? At the death of the father, it goes back to Sarah. The only difference is, does John keep it for his father's entire life? Or does the father get to go on it for at least some portion of his natural life, right? But once the father dies, it goes back to Sarah, reversion, no question. Do not call it a reverter. Don't call it a reverter, reversion. You handy? Yeah.
Yes. I think I have the same kind of confusion. I think it might be what Andrew's saying. It sounds more like from reading it. But if you abandon Blackacre, then Blackacre will go to your father. But if the father's dead, it goes to the mother, and like it's attached to the abandonment, not.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
necessarily
I see what
the
you're
life
saying.
estate. That's how I was a little confused when I was reading it.
But would it matter, right?
No, it doesn't.
It actually
I think in explaining it, like when it
Oh,
comes into play.
well, I see what you're saying. Let me try to explain this again. So he says, but then Blackacre will go to your father, comma.
But if your father is dead when he abandons.
Well, let me put it this way. What if I just deleted this last sentence, right? I just stopped it there, period. Period.
It would still be reversion.
It'd be the same thing. This is entirely unnecessary. In fact, I didn't even need to put this. Everyone understand what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
If I just stop the sentence here, this is, I think, Brittany and Andrew's question.
Well, I think, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
If I just put a period there and I stopped it there, it'd be the exact same thing, right? I was perhaps trying to be nice and give you a little hint, but I could have just stopped it there. What you're reading, I think, is actually completely plausible. It doesn't change the answer. I think it would just be slightly different, that if there's abandonment and the father's dead, it goes to the mother, but if the father's dead, it goes to the mother anyway.
Right.
So once the father's dead, see what I mean about writing questions to anticipate curveballs? I didn't see this one, right? I tried, but you guys are good. You're poking holes, which is good. And
So Joe, you cut off that highlighted part, and wouldn't it go to the father and it'd be simple, and so then wouldn't it go to his heirs?
No, it doesn't say father and his heirs. It just says father.
Oh, okay, see.
Yeah. I think it's still measured by the father's natural life.
Okay.
I could have said, then Blackacre go to father and his heirs. You could say that. That's not what I... Right, don't presume fee simple. Don't presume and his heirs is there. If I don't say it, then it's just what it is. Good question. Good questions. I like when you poke holes. And this is why the future interest question is so difficult, because I think three people reading them in three different reasonable ways can probably come up with three reasonable answers. And if you explain yourself in the exam, I'll give you credit. If you just give me 1, 2, 3, bam, 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 I can't give you partial credit. But if you walk me through your thinking, I can get you there. Kendra?
But I thought with the life estate, the remainders are the ones that follow.
Well, remainder one goes to a third party, but here it's reversion because it goes back to the grantor, the mom. What else in this one?
So is
I'm sorry?
the fee simple or the estate, whatever question I'm using? Because I think I have the same problem everybody has reading this. I read it the last I didn't like this question.
Okay, fair enough.
So that's not going to happen on the exam.
I try really hard. It's really hard to write these questions that are difficult without having ambiguity. Because if I make it very precise, it's an easy question. Having a little flexibility in it makes it a real question for an exam. I think I don't remember what I was thinking last year, but it winds up in the same place. It doesn't wind up in a different answer, so it actually doesn't bother me too much. Right? If you have two different ways of reading it and winding the same answer, that's fine by me. What else? And let me show you now the A+, to show you how I think they got it incorrect, or at least partially incorrect. Again, I don't like this, just listing it without explanations. I prefer you to explain yourself a little bit. So life is a protreve, subject executory limitation. Yeah. You know, here at executive limitation and executory interest, you flip between the two. I don't know why people do that. Use one or the other. I don't really care which one, but try to keep it the same. Then it says the future interest, fee, FI, right? John's father is a shifting executory interest and fee simple. What? No, that's not right. No, that's wrong. Wrong. But if, yeah, wrong. So, I don't know, maybe this was a bad year. I don't remember why this is wrong. Okay, sorry. So yeah, don't listen to what I said, not this. Okay. Any other questions on 4? Several of you came to yell at me with this one yesterday, so I was ready for it. What was that, Julian? I was here till 8:30 last night. I was like, almost done. All right. What else? Anything? All right, to the last one. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry?
I'm not going to ask it. I'm not going to ask it.
Whatever you want. Okay. No. All right. We do 5? All right, do 5. Okay. Oh, I forgot to mention it was dated and signed. Not that it really matters, but this makes a difference for later. Okay. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. None of this stuff really matters. Okay. All right. So the policy question now. In this post-apocalyptic world where there are no courts or laws, address why it is important to protect property rights. Specifically consider the impact of the protection of property rights on the resolution of this never-ending conflict between man and machine. All right, let's see what the A+ person put here. All right. Property rights in this post-apocalyptic world will be essential to maintain order, certainty, efficiency of resources. Those are fairly broad categories which you might want to keep in your back pocket. These sorts of things that tend to repeat themselves on lots of exams. Without property rights in the future, no one's work can be protected. By the way, next year, someone will be laughing at your A+ paper. So I know you're all saying, oh, this guy's an idiot. Next year, whoever gets A+, the people will be saying, oh, that's wrong, Blackman. Yeah, you're right. So it happens every year. So karma comes around. It happens to be every year. It's like, wow, these are good papers. I'm like, they're not so good. But again, in context, you're all sitting here quiet in a calm environment with collective resources. You have 3 hours. You're under pressure. Your work's not going to be perfect. It can't be. So it says, without property rights in the future age, no one's work can be protected. Without the protection of work and property law, the incentives to create good incentives, innovate, and provide for oneself will be extinguished, and the world will be reduced to barbarism. This is kind of what I was getting at, right? Because we don't have a efficient protection of property rights. Battle these robots and these man. If you remember the first week of class, I gave an example. Like, you're on the deserted island, right? And it's just you, there's no problem. But then there's someone else shows up, and he's stealing your coconuts, right? And he's stealing your water. And you start fighting to the death. And property rights were created to resolve the sorts of tragedies of the commons. And that's sort of what I think this is getting at. Property rights will ensure that communities can be built efficiently without problem or theft or even murder. Furthermore, without property rights, resources could be potentially overused and misused. It is imperative that if there is any what am I doing? Any more efficient allocate sustainable human life in the post-apocalyptic world. Karma, someone will be laughing at your exam next year. There cannot be an efficient allocation of resources. The resources must be used wisely. With property laws, markets can become more efficient and resources can be put to more beneficial use. These considerations are the utmost important in the resolution of conflict between man and machine. Man and machine can come to an agreement and solutions if there are rules to abide by. Otherwise, remain a free-for-all. Okay, this is what I was talking about. Theft, murder, and ongoing conflict will continue to this issue. So, again, this is good, pretty good. But what I would like to have discussed is how the allocation of property rights can actually minimize the struggle, the conflict. Indeed, the question I gave you was basically looking at that. It said, how will the property right protection resolve this conflict between man and machine? So pay very close attention until I frame the question. I'm trying to give you a hint of what I'm looking for with that. So what else could they have discussed? I think here, again, Johnson versus McIntosh is deep. I can't. See it later. I think Johnson versus McIntosh is a good case. We discussed protection of property rights as a way to resolve the conflicts between the natives and the Americans, right? That if you have people asserting competing claims to the same piece of property, it's bad. And so they have this rule of conquest and discovery and everything else to settle it. That'd be one case. But what I really wanted to discuss is the sort of trapped on a desert island example I gave at first week of class. It's not a case, but I think it illustrates well that when you don't have property rights, people fight over limited, scarce resources, and it creates lots of problems. Absolutely, yeah. And indeed, one way to resolve the tragedy of the commons is with force, right? You can have government, or you can have a battle, fighting over LA, for example. Yes? Yeah, I mean, at least the last couple of years, maybe not my first year or two, but I think in recent years, I'm sure you can check me on this, I usually try and put number 5 to something policy. But again, the fact that I call it a policy question doesn't mean you have to just give me your opinion. There are cases that discuss policy. I'll give you an example. On the midterm, we had a question about homes, and Holmes had this quote saying, you know, it's an abomination that we follow a rule simply because we've had this rule since the time of, was it Henry IV, whatever it was. And this is in your book, we discussed it, but we did a lot of cases about this. What cases, Josh? How many cases we did in New Jersey and California, for example, where they abandoned the common law rule? They said, we're not doing the twiggle, right, the liver of season. We're not doing that anymore. Like, those are cases that you can bring in to make your answer stronger. That shows me that you not only understand the policy, but you know where it comes from. Because in this class, we talk about cases every day. It's all we ever do, talk about cases. So you should probably have a discussion of case in every single of the 5 parts. Okay. So question number 5. Questions number 5. Going once. Going twice.
Wait.
Yeah, Marcus.
So you're saying usually question number 5 is policy, and usually you said that it's based off, it doesn't have to always be our opinion, but you're saying that our opinion can also be an answer. So if we don't get points, are you saying our opinion is wrong?
Your opinion is never wrong, Marcus. No. No, again, opinions are fine. They get you like 7 or 8 points, right? But to get to the 9 or the 10, show me what some judges, what their opinions are, right? Your opinions are valid. I would never tell a student her opinion is wrong. But the opinion of people with robes tend to matter a little bit more. Maybe that shouldn't be the case. I don't think it should be the case. I don't think judges are any smarter than all of you. What William F. Buckley said, rather be ruled by the first 100 people in the phone book than the faculty of Harvard Law School, right? And I think they generally feel that way. Or at least Supreme Court justice from Harvard. Yeah. Named Roberts. Go ahead. They didn't. I mentioned the Johnson vs. McIntosh. That'd be a good one to bring up for this one. Yeah, Brittany.
In the A+ answer, can you scroll up for to 3, please?
Let me go to the A+.
Yes. I mean to 4. I'm sorry.
Oh, we're back to this one?
Right, the wrong one.
Yeah. You're not going to let me abandon this one, are you?
You mentioned when we went over the midterm that you want us to discuss how the list, what they are. Is that also something that
yes, please.
This person did not do?
Yeah. Again, this was probably a 43 or 42 if I had to guess. They lost 8 points, right, on this question. So, you lose basically 1 or 2 per question. It's not a perfect 10. What this also illustrates is with a curve, which I'm sure students love to hate, you don't need 100, right? I mean, I went over your scores with each individually. A 70 gets you roughly a B, right? 70 of 100 gets you roughly a B. Without a curve, that'd be like, what, a C- or a D? So you're welcome. I have to curve. I wouldn't if I didn't have to, but I have to curve, so you will rely on it. It's true. I would if I didn't have to curve, I wouldn't, but you would not be happy with me.
To be clear. So
no one will get an A in that case.
To be clear, just kind of like your memo said, and then also
the A+ this midterm semester was pretty good also, the hybrid one I put up.
Okay, so explaining why it would be.
Yeah, it's a life estate per attribute because it lasts for the duration of the life of the father. It's subject to executor limitation because the father can cut it short. It's shifting because it's showing the short the interest of the transferee, that sort of thing. Okay. Make sense? Was that a hand? Questions at number 5. Okay. Questions on anything else?
Can we just go over the other policy one just to see?
Which one? The
other
midterm?
policy for the second one?
Oh, yeah, I haven't reviewed it, but I'll do my best. Yeah.
Just to get like.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Again, I didn't review this in advance, but I'll do my best. Okay, I remember this one. Okay, very good. So this is from part 2, question 5. Let me read it to you. It says, in light of all the legal difficulties that resulted from the joint property held by Sarah and Arnold, they were married in this case, why should the law provide special protection for marital property? That is, why should the state award benefits for married couples who jointly hold property? Okay, let's see what the person referring plus. Okay. The state should provide special protections to marital property because marriage is a sacred institution. Sorry. If you were my Bergefell class, you'd have a different lesson, right? It's a sacred institution. Ask a hippie, right? Where spouses are partners for life and essentially work with one another in creating and acquiring property. The state shall allow spouses the right to survive one another in property and to elect to take property after death because partners contribute to each other. And it will be unjust to deprive spouses the benefits that come with that partnership and contribution to one another. Furthermore, because both partners contribute to the acquisition of property, it would not be right to allow creditors or some other adverse claimants of one spouse to come in and foreclose or levy the property because of a spouse's mistake. This is the precise reasons. These are the precise reasons why legislatures created the Married Women's Property Act. Good. It would be unjust for a woman's property to not be immune from her husband's creditors in some married couples or economic units, and their property should not be given special protections and benefits by the state because property acquired jointly is inherently different than property acquired independently. So this is a decent answer. I don't think, again, they brought in any cases. One that comes to mind is Sawada versus Endo. Remember this was a case from Hawaii where they got into a car accident. I think that's a good one. Also one that I think might be relevant is the Schwartzbach case. Right, this is the one where the guy's wife, this is the boxing ring, right? Remember where she objected to building the boxing ring on the property. There's also the case, and I'm blanking on the name, I didn't prep this one, where the wife wrote the husband out of the will right before he died, and she conveyed the thing to herself to kill the joint tenancy. Sacred institution, huh? Right? So, yeah, thank you, Brittany. Riddle v. Harmon, thank you. So those are a few of the cases I think you probably could have discussed to make this answer more solid. But also they mentioned the Married Women's Property Act, and that was the subject of the Sawada versus Endo case. So I think that is also fair game. Okay. Answer your question, Andrew? Okay. Other questions? By hand? Every year, maybe one or two. Every one or two. What? Sometimes, yeah. If I sense it's too long. Generally, people who handwrite don't write that much because it's cramps. But I've had people who have gone over the limit by hand, and I do a count. They don't. I mean, it annoys me, but I do it. It's only fair. It doesn't take that long. I mean, it takes me less than a minute to count the words. It's actually fairly quick. I usually do it like one paragraph at a time. And I write the number in the margin and I add them up. So it's pretty quick. What else?
Just to be clear, you do take off points. You don't just
If you get
add
something,
points.
yeah, if you get something, I'll take off points. I mean, if it makes you feel better, I just won't add points, right? I mean, it makes it's a possible 10. So you can say, well, I only added 6 instead of adding 8, instead of taking 2 up to make it better. I mean, actually, it's like
I feel like it's better.
it's okay. You know what? I don't take points up. I only don't add them. I don't subtract. I don't add. Is that? Joanne, am I good on my math with that one? Thank you.
Sounds good to me.
What else? I won't subtract points. I only won't add them. I will not subtract. I'll decline to add. Hashtag math law school, right? What else, you guys? Anything else? Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.